The old man at the gas station pumped my gas without a word, his face a roadmap of wrinkles that seemed to hold the secrets of the desolate landscape around us. We were in the middle of nowhere, a forgotten corner of the Texas panhandle that time had seemingly overlooked. The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt, and the air was thick with the smell of dust and gasoline. "Headed out to the flats?" he finally asked, his voice a low gravelly rumble. I nodded, trying to look nonchalant. "Yeah, thought I'd get some pictures. I'm a photographer." He squinted at me, his eyes the color of a faded blue sky. "Ain't nothing out there but dust and wind, and things best left undisturbed." I forced a smile. "I've heard the sunsets are something special." He didn't return the smile. "They are," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But it's what comes after the sun goes down that you need to worry about." He finished with the gas, and I paid him in cash. As I was getting back into my truck, he put a hand on my arm, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. "You see them dancers," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "You turn around and you drive. You don't stop for nothing. You hear me?" I nodded, a shiver running down my spine despite the heat. "Dancers?" "Dust devils," he said, releasing my arm. "But they ain't no ordinary dust devils out there. They dance to a tune you don't ever want to hear." With that cryptic warning, he turned and walked back into the gas station, leaving me alone with the wind and the vast, empty expanse of the Texas plains. I should have listened to him. I should have turned around and driven back to the city, back to the noise and the crowds and the safety of civilization. But I was a fool. I was a photographer, always chasing the perfect shot, the one that would make my career. And the stories I'd heard about this place, the whispers of strange lights and unnatural storms, were too tempting to resist. So I drove on deeper into the heart of the desolation. The paved road gave way to a dirt track, and the last signs of human life disappeared behind me. The landscape was beautiful in a stark, brutal way. The sky was a vast, endless canvas of blue, and the earth was a patchwork of brown and gold. But there was an emptiness to it that was unsettling, a silence that was more than just the absence of sound. I found the spot I was looking for late in the afternoon, a small rise that overlooked a vast, flat plain. It was the perfect vantage point to watch the sunset and, if the rumors were true, to witness the strange phenomena that were said to occur here after dark. I set up my camera and settled in to wait. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sky exploded in a riot of color. Hues of orange, pink, and purple painted the clouds, and the land was bathed in a warm, golden light. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and for a moment I forgot the old man's warning. I was just a photographer, capturing the beauty of the natural world. But as the last sliver of sun disappeared, a chill crept into the air. The temperature dropped, and the wind began to pick up. It wasn't a steady wind, but a series of gusts and eddies that seemed to come from all directions at once. And with the wind came a sound, a low, mournful wail that seemed to rise up from the earth itself. That's when I saw them. At first, they looked like ordinary dust devils, swirling columns of sand and debris that danced across the plain. But there was something different about them, something unnatural. They moved with a strange, almost intelligent grace, their movements synchronized and purposeful. They weren't just being blown by the wind, they were moving with it, a part of it. I started taking pictures, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the shot I'd been waiting for. But as I looked through the lens, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were shapes in the dust devils. They were faint at first, little more than fleeting shadows in the swirling sand. But as the dancers grew in size and intensity, the shapes became clearer. I saw twisted, elongated figures that looked vaguely human, their limbs flailing and their bodies contorting in a grotesque parody of a dance. I saw faces, their features contorted in silent screams of agony. I lowered my camera, my hands shaking. The old man's words echoed in my mind. They danced to a tune you don't ever want to hear. The wailing on the wind grew louder, and I could hear whispers in it now, distorted voices that spoke in a language I didn't understand but that filled me with a primal fear. The dancers were getting closer, their movements becoming more frenzied, more aggressive. They were no longer just dancing, they were hunting. I scrambled to pack up my gear, my fingers fumbling with the latches and straps. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from this place. I threw my camera bag into the truck and jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the truck into gear, spewing a cloud of dust as I sped away. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I just drove, my eyes fixed on the dirt track ahead. The whispering on the wind pursued me, clawing at the windows of the truck, and I could see the dancers in my rearview mirror, their shadowy forms silhouetted against the darkening sky. I drove for what felt like hours, not slowing down until I saw the welcome glow of the gas station in the distance. I pulled in, my body trembling and my mind reeling from what I had seen. The old man was there, sitting on a rocking chair on the porch, as if he'd been waiting for me. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sad, knowing expression. "You saw them, didn't you?" he asked. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Some things in this world ain't meant to be seen," he said. "Some doors ain't meant to be opened." I finally found my voice. "What are they?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shook his head. "They're the souls of the damned," he said. "The ones who got lost in the wind, the ones who listened to the whispers. They're the ones who danced to the devil's tune." I spent the night in a motel in the nearest town, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the swirling figures in the dust, their silent screams echoing in my mind. The next morning, I drove back to the city, back to the world I knew. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. I tried to tell people what I had seen. I showed them the pictures. But they didn't believe me. They said it was just a trick of the light, a flaw in the lens, a product of my overactive imagination. They dismissed my story as a hoax, a cry for attention. But I know what I saw. I know what's out there in the desolate plains of Texas. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I can still hear the whispers. I can still hear the devil's tune. And I know that the dancers are still out there, waiting for the next person to stumble into their forgotten corner of the world, waiting for the next soul to join their eternal, tormented dance. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled days. I couldn't shake the images from my mind, the memory of those twisting, tormented figures in the swirling dust. I pored over my photographs, enlarging them, enhancing them, searching for some clue, some explanation for what I had seen. But the more I looked, the more questions I had. The figures were there, no doubt about it. They were faint, ethereal, but they were there. I could see their faces, their eyes wide with a terror that transcended the digital pixels on my screen. I could see their mouths open in silent screams, their bodies contorted in impossible angles. It was as if they were trapped in a perpetual state of agony, their souls bound to the very wind that had claimed them. I started doing research, digging into the history of the area. I spent hours in libraries and online forums searching for any mention of the dancers, any stories of strange disappearances or unexplained phenomena. I found more than I bargained for. The area had a long and bloody history. It was once the territory of a fierce Comanche tribe, a tribe that was said to worship the wind and the spirits that rode upon it. They believed that the wind was a living entity, a powerful force that could give life and take it away. They would make sacrifices to the wind, offering up their enemies and sometimes even their own people to appease the spirits and ensure a bountiful harvest. Later, when the settlers came, the land became a battleground. There were countless skirmishes and massacres, the ground soaked with the blood of both the Comanche and the white man. The settlers who survived told stories of the devil's wind, a strange, localized storm that would appear out of nowhere, its winds so powerful they could rip a man from his horse and tear the flesh from his bones. They said the wind was filled with the vengeful spirits of the dead, their cries of anguish carried on the gale. And then there were the disappearances. Over the years, dozens of people had vanished in that area without a trace. They were ranchers, prospectors, travelers, people who had strayed too far from the beaten path. The official explanation was always the same: they had gotten lost, succumbed to the elements, or fallen prey to wild animals. But the locals knew better. They knew it was the dancers that had taken them, the dancers that had claimed another soul for their eternal, macabre ballet. The more I read, the more I realized that I had stumbled upon something ancient and evil, something that had been lurking in that desolate corner of the world for centuries. And I had done the one thing that everyone who knew the stories warned against: I had captured its image. I had brought back proof of its existence. I knew I had to go back. I had to get more evidence, something that no one could deny. I had to show the world what was out there. It was a stupid, reckless idea. I knew that. But I was obsessed. The dancers had a hold on me, a grip that was as strong and as relentless as the wind itself. So I prepared for my return. I bought new camera equipment, more powerful lenses, and a state-of-the-art night vision camera. I also bought a gun. I didn't know if a bullet could stop a ghost, but it made me feel better to have it. I told no one where I was going. I didn't want anyone to try to stop me. I just left a note for my landlord saying that I was going on a long trip and that I would be back in a few weeks. I didn't know if that was a lie or not. The drive back to the Texas Panhandle was different this time. The landscape that had once seemed beautiful now seemed menacing, the vast emptiness filled with a palpable sense of dread. I felt like I was being watched, like the wind itself was tracking my every move. I arrived at the gas station late in the afternoon. The old man was there, sitting in his rocking chair, as if he hadn't moved since I had last seen him. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "You came back," he said, his voice a low, mournful sigh. "I have to," I said. "I have to know what they are." He shook his head slowly. "Some things are better left unknown," he said. "Some graves are better left undisturbed." "I have to try," I insisted. He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze searching my face. Then he nodded, a look of resignation in his eyes. "I can't stop you," he said. "But I can give you this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, leather pouch. He handed it to me. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "She was a medicine woman. She said it would protect me from the evil spirits." I took the pouch. It was filled with dried herbs and what felt like small stones. It smelled of sage and cedar. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It might not be enough," he said, "but it's all I have to give." He looked out at the setting sun, his face a mask of sorrow. "Be careful, son," he said, "and whatever you do, don't listen to the whispers." I left the gas station and drove out to the flats, the old man's words echoing in my mind. The sun was already beginning to set, casting long, airy shadows across the land. The wind was picking up, and I could hear the faint, mournful wail that had haunted my dreams for weeks. I found the same spot on the rise and set up my equipment. I put the medicine pouch around my neck, its weight a small comfort in the growing darkness. Then I settled in to wait. The dancers appeared as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. They were bigger this time, more numerous. They swirled and danced across the plain, their shadowy forms illuminated by the faint light of the rising moon. I started taking pictures, my hands steady despite the fear that was gnawing at my insides. I used the night vision camera, hoping to capture a clearer image of the figures within the dust devils. The results were more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. The night vision camera cut through the swirling dust, revealing the figures within in gruesome detail. They were not just shadows, they were corporeal beings, their bodies twisted and broken, their flesh torn and rotting. They were the victims of the devil's wind, their souls trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. I could see the faces of the Comanche warriors, their features frozen in a silent war cry. I could see the faces of the settlers, their eyes wide with the terror of their final moments. I could see the faces of the ranchers and the prospectors, their bodies still bearing the marks of their violent deaths. And I could hear them. The whispers were no longer just a jumble of unintelligible sounds. I could hear their voices, their pleas for help, their cries of agony. They were trapped, and they were in pain. I felt a wave of pity for them, for these lost souls caught between worlds. But my pity was quickly replaced by a growing sense of terror. The dancers were getting closer. They were no longer just dancing on the plain, they were moving up the rise, coming for me. I could feel the ground shaking beneath my feet. The wind was a roaring torrent now, tearing at my clothes and threatening to rip my camera from my hands. The whispers were a deafening chorus of screams, a symphony of a million different agonies. I knew I had to get out of there. But I was frozen, mesmerized by the horrifying spectacle before me. One of the dancers broke away from the others and came straight for me. It was a massive, swirling column of dust and debris, and in its center was the figure of a Comanche warrior, his face a mask of rage and his eyes burning with an unholy light. He raised his spectral tomahawk, and I knew that my time was up. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But it never came. I heard a loud crack, like a whip snapping, and the wind suddenly died down. The roaring in my ears subsided, and the chorus of screams faded to a faint whisper. I opened my eyes. The Comanche warrior was gone. The dancers were retreating, moving back down the rise and out onto the plain. And standing in front of me was the old man from the gas station. He was holding a long, wooden staff, and at its tip was a cluster of eagle feathers that seemed to glow in the moonlight. He was chanting in a low, guttural language, his voice filled with a power that seemed to push back the darkness. "Get out of here," he shouted at me. "Go now." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my camera bag and ran to my truck. I didn't look back. I just drove, my foot pressed to the floor, not slowing down until I was miles away from that cursed place. I never saw the old man again. I went back to the gas station the next day, but it was abandoned, a thick layer of dust covering everything. It was as if he had never been there. I have the pictures. I have the proof. But I'll never show them to anyone. Some things are better left unknown, some graves better left undisturbed. I know what's out there in the Texas plains. And I know that the old man, the medicine man, is still there, standing guard, protecting the world from the evil that lurks in the wind. He is the only thing that stands between us and the dancers, the only thing that keeps the devil's tune from consuming us all. And I pray that he is strong enough to hold them back, for if he ever falters, the whole world will be forced to join their eternal, tormented dance.